Hey guys, I want to welcome you back to another episode of the Men of Bronze podcast. I am the host and founder of the Men of Bronze movement, Stephen Lopes. This week in the Men of Bronze podcast, I sit down with Ryan Munsey, who is the author of F Your Feelings and the co-founder of the Better Human Project. Ryan is also a sought-after thought leader who specializes in high performance and the development of both individuals and organizations. In this episode, guys, we discuss a few of the topics in Ryan's book, which is F Your Feelings, and this book really took me by surprise. A lot of the topics we talk about are the importance of goal setting and the shocking numbers about how few of the population actually set and achieve goals and what that looks like from a statistical standpoint. We discuss how we can improve our skills by stretching our limits and what that looks like. Also, how our lives are perfectly designed for the results that we are getting. And I know that one's a bit of a hard pill to swallow, but it's important to self-reflect on. We also discuss how neurological wiring versus muscle memory, what that is, what that looks like from a scientific standpoint. And we finish off by talking about how we should be focusing on moving the chains in our everyday life versus looking for that Hail Mary or that highlight reel play. This is a great conversation, guys, and Ryan was an absolute blast to talk with. He's a real intellectual, and I don't want to offend him, but it took me by surprise because the title of the book it kind of is meant to throw you off a little bit, and it really works. And we kind of discuss that a little bit in the podcast as well about why he named it that and why he didn't change it. So that part's kind of interesting as well, guys. But I want to highly encourage you to grab a copy of the book, whether it's a physical or the audible version. The book is incredible, and I promise you, it'll surprise you, and it'll totally blindside you. So if you're like me and you're kind of on the go, but you're looking to grow, grab the Audible version. If you're kind of a bookworm, which I also like to read in printed form as well, but you don't always have the time, grab a physical copy, and you can get a signed copy on his website at ryanmunsey.com. So check him out at ryanmunsey.com. You can find all his social media links, his programs, his podcast, everything there, guys, and check him out on social media as well. Before we hop into this podcast, guys, I want to encourage you to subscribe to the Men of Bronze podcast on whatever platform you are viewing or listening on, whether it's YouTube or on your favorite podcast app. Hit subscribe, hit the notification bell as well. Connect with me on social media, guys. You can find me on Instagram at StephenLopes_MOB. Find all the links in the description box below or wherever the description is in your podcast app. You can also check out our website, menofbronze.ca. There's a blog post for each podcast episode with every link you could hope for. So check that out, guys. And without further ado, here is Ryan Munsey as we discuss F Your Feelings. Enjoy it, guys. Yeah, it's so awesome being able to connect. You talk about that a few times in your book, actually, is like getting out, connecting with nature, and even if it's a short period of time. And you also talk about even just like looking at a picture can increase your mental state. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. When you start looking into that research, we as humans, until I don't know, 150 years ago, we didn't have electricity, right?
Yeah.
And until I don't know, 300, 400, 500 years ago, even up until the point where we had electricity, our sleep, wake, work cycles were dictated by daylight, right? Like if the sun didn't come up, like good luck getting stuff done.
Yeah.
So our lives were completely different than they are now in terms of, how we planned our days and when and what type of work we did. We didn't have air conditioning. We didn't have heat. You had to go split firewood and build a fire to heat your home, and just totally different lifestyles. And, that can get into, depending on where you want to go with the conversation, we could go down the sedentary side of that. We can go down the food side of that. But, to your point about nature, we have always lived in harmony with nature and sort of dictated by nature and those natural rhythms on a daily basis, on a seasonal basis, on a yearly basis, right? And we'd always been very connected to that. And it's only until recently that we've kind of gotten away from that. And I think it's no coincidence that we're starting to see, as a matter of fact, it's not my opinion about coincidence. There's tons of studies that support this, that as we remove ourselves from nature, the less time we spend in nature, the more time we spend in urban or city areas, we start to see incidents of depression go up.
Mm,
We start to see perceived levels of happiness go down. And in some of those same studies, as you mentioned, just looking at pictures of nature for 10 minutes can improve our mood and our perceived happiness. And I think that's a really powerful, it's really powerful evidence or proof that, we are, it's in our DNA, right? Like
yeah.
we've when you look at kind of the cosmic calendar, there's a ton of different analogies for this, but I think the one that makes the most sense, or the one that people hear the most, is that if the cosmic calendar were a year, we would be at 11:59 p.m. on December 31st right now, and the everything is behind us, right? And so, in terms of how much time has elapsed, and it's hard for us to imagine that.
Mm,
So, putting it on a scale like a calendar year in that way that we can understand, we can see, how old the universe is, and um, we're like 11:59:59, so like we're looking at like 1 second.
yeah.
But for us, hundreds of years seems like a long time, because that's just the only scale that we have that we
It's
can
all
understand.
relative.
Exactly.
Yeah, there was, you said like depending where you want this conversation to go, and like I've been trying to wrap my head around where I want it to go as well, because I have so many notes from your book. Like I've never taken so many notes while going through a book before. So
I love hearing that, man. Thank you.
well, yeah, like it's very unique, right? Because you've got a ton of awesome information, a ton of advice and wisdom and all this kind of stuff. But then it's also backed with all these studies and everything. And there was a lot more scientific um, content than I was expecting. So that was a bit of a curveball in a good way, but it was just very unique. And especially, you even addressed this a little bit, like when you hear the title, I definitely didn't expect to have so many scientific articles cited and all this great knowledge. It was really a great surprise. It was very interesting. And I did it via the audio book on Audible.
Okay, cool.
And so that was great, because it was nice to be able to hear it with your voice and with your inflections and everything. So that was kind of unique. I'm kind of new to the whole Audible thing. So that was kind of
Oh,
cool.
cool. How did
But
you first come across the book?
I just stumbled across you on Instagram, actually.
Okay, cool.
And so I started following you on my other account, the Men of Bronze account. And then
Mhm.
after like a day, I was like, I was going through your feed and I was like, I got to talk to this guy. So when you talk about moonshots in your book a lot
Yeah.
too. And that's kind of what I'm doing with this podcast, is that, my following is only a couple hundred people right now. So everything's a moonshot for me. And I'm like, well, I want to talk to these people, and people like to talk. So, I don't care if you have 40,000 followers or 15,000 followers. I mean, I'm going to reach out and we'll see what happens. So, and I've had the opportunity to connect with some awesome guys, and, obviously you being one of them. So it's been pretty great.
Yeah, I love that approach, man. And I do the same thing with our podcast. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is people say no. And
Exactly.
if they say no, and that's the same result as if you didn't ask, right? Like,
Yep.
no harm done. And it always baffles me, when people don't take that shot, they don't reach out, or,
Mm,
whatever the thing is, right? And there's, obviously some of that is what is explored in the book. And um, yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that with all the science. And my training is science. I mean, I've got a degree in food science and human nutrition, and I always joke and tell people that I hated writing in high school and college, and I thought, okay, I'm going to major in a science so I don't have to write. And that
yeah.
was the
Right.
worst mistake ever, because anybody who's taken like a science focused major, not only do you have to go to 3-hour labs, but then you have to go write lab reports every single week. And so that was actually the like, it's the worst thing you could do. You'd be much better off actually just being an English major and writing, one paper per semester for each of those classes. But you know, when the book was almost ready to publish, um, Fuck Your Feelings was the title,
Hmm.
and it was the working title. And we tried so hard to come up with something else because like I liked it, and I thought it would be fun to do. But I mean, obviously there's some considerations. I mean, there will be some people who literally judge it by the cover and
Yep.
never pick it up. Um, on the flip side of that, there will be a lot of people, and have been a lot of people, that see the cover and they're like, man, I got to read that book, and they
Hmm.
pick it up. And ultimately, that's why we chose the title. I say we, I had an editor, and I had a kind of a team of people that were kind of my advisors. But one of the other working titles was something like The Neuroscience of High Performance. And we decided that that was going to scare away a lot of people, and that some people, the real science heavy folks would see that and jump on it.
Mm.
But then, maybe the average or the lay person who hadn't yet been exposed to a lot of the stuff that's in the book, might be scared by that title. It might seem like, oh, well, I don't want to read a textbook. So, you know,
Yeah,
as you can,
it probably would have affected my opinion on it, to be honest. It would have sounded a little too intense for me. Whereas, F Your Feelings was a little bit enticing for me.
right, right. And I wouldn't change it. I'm glad we did that. If there's a negative, it's the fact that we cannot run ads for it. So,
Right.
I can't promote it on Amazon. I can't run ads for it on, social media. Um, and that's been okay. I mean, fortunately, I've been really fortunate that the book has done what it's done. The work kind of speaks for itself. And so people talk about it and recommend it, and,
Hmm.
get the opportunity to come on podcasts like this and talk about it. And so it's been an amazing experience ever since it came out.
That's awesome. Yeah, a lot of the things in the book really jumped out at me, and especially like some of the numbers. And you even go over this in the book. It's like when you see the numbers, it's really shocking.
Mhm.
And there's going to be some things that I need to adjust in my life, because looking at the numbers, it's pretty alarming.
I'm assuming that you're talking about like some of the time management stuff, and how you, like, if you compound even 1 hour a
Yeah, so like like the TV watching, ends up
day.
being like 14% of your life, and but other things
Yeah,
too, like you said 6% of the population set and achieve goals.
that was
So
crazy to me. I mean, I grew up playing sports. I grew up in it was never like an overt or direct, like, hey, set goals, do this. And
mm,
I don't know, maybe it was. I mean, maybe I do owe some of that to my parents for sitting me down early and saying, what are your goals for this season? What are your goals for this school year? Um, but for whatever reason, it's always been, that's just always how I think. That's how I approach things. What do I want to get out of this? What do I want to accomplish? What does success look like for coming on this podcast? What does success look like for this weekend or this week, or this conference that you're going to go
mm,
to? And I think so many of us are. Uh, I guess as I've experienced the world and worked with people, I realize that not everyone thinks that way. And then obviously, as you mentioned, the numbers that are in the book. It's been a while since I looked at that. You may know the numbers better than I do, but I think it was something like only 30% of the population
yeah,
sets goals,
yep,
and then of that, only 20%
it was
actually
something
accomplishes
like
them.
that. Yeah,
And so that's where the 6% comes from. It's like 20% of 30% of the population is 6%. So
it was crazy.
yeah, it blew my mind. And that's, I mean, again, like, that's kind of why I wrote the book. Is, I want people to understand how we're wired, and how powerfully our biology and physiology drive our psychology, and therefore our beliefs and our choices and our
Mm,
decisions and our actions and how we spend our time. And it's really sort of a user's manual for being human, and being a successful human. um, because it always fascinated me how some people seem to struggle with any goal, no matter how big or small.
Yeah.
And then there were other people who excelled at accomplishing things, no matter what they set their mind out to. And, um, at the end of the day, we're all, we all have 10 toes, 10 fingers. If I want to play the guitar like Bruce Springsteen or shoot a basketball like Michael Jordan, I have the same things that they're starting with. If I'm willing to do the work that they put in to achieve their level of mastery, we all have the ability to achieve really high levels of performance at whatever it is that we want to do.
Yeah, that's one thing you said in the book was like, pushing your limits on things. And your example was speed reading. So if you're comfortable reading, X amount of words per minute, and if you go up to 400 words per minute, it's too much and you can't comprehend as many words. Well, push that limit even further, and then the 400 becomes comfortable. So it's like
Yeah.
we need to constantly push ourselves farther out of our comfort zone to improve ourselves.
Right. And I mean, that analogy really stems from my background in the strength world, right? And, if you look at somebody who, let's say our maximum strength is 100 pounds, right? Like say somebody, the most that they can lift and hold is 100 pounds. And then we ask them to, okay, now take this 70-pound pack and you've got to put it on your back and you've got to walk for 2 miles. Well, if the most you can pick up and hold is 100 pounds, that 70 pounds is 70% of your capacity. And, you're not likely to be able to do that very long. If we take your ceiling, your absolute strength from 100 to 140 pounds, that same 70 pounds goes from 70% down to 50%.
Mm-hmm.
And if I ask you to operate at 50% of your capacity as opposed to 70% of your capacity, that is something that you can sustain much longer in a much more comfortable way. And so, we're applying that to, reading or, relationships or business or anything else in our life. And so a lot of the concepts in the book have huge carryover in what we would call transfer of skill. So, those are things that, when applied to any area of our life can be beneficial.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. It's definitely something that I'm going to try and implement as much as I can. I mean, obviously when I lift, that's when you're constantly doing that, right? You're adding, you're adding 5 pounds on your bench press each week. If that's all you can, I mean, it's better than adding no pounds. Instead of sitting at 215, go to 220, and then next week you can lift 220 comfortably. And then the week after that, go 225, and go in these small increments and like you said, raise that ceiling up. And that's how you get progression. And we have to push ourselves, right? You can't just be sitting in a comfortable zone and say, oh, I can bench 135 no problem, so I just bench 135 all the time. It's
No,
pointless.
absolutely. You're right. And, the one thing that I would caution people is to just remember that progress is never linear. Um, we always had this joke or analogy, I guess, lesson in the strength world of, if we could add 5 pounds to our squat or our bench, every single week for infinity, in 2 years, you'd be squatting 1,000 pounds, and that just doesn't happen. So we have to take a step back and remember that yes, progression is the goal, and yes, adding X number of pounds every week is kind of a good place to either look or start. There's a lot of different ways to progress. Like even if we just keep the conversation to our analogy of strength here, you can progress by adding weight to the bar. You can progress by keeping the same weight and doing more reps. You can do less rest. You can do more work in the same amount of time. So that's density. There's a lot of different ways to push for progression without necessarily adding weight to the bar.
Yeah, and there's that term of like a point of diminishing return in weightlifting, right? And exercise in general. And it really turns off a lot of new people sometimes because they'll work out for the first 2 weeks and they're super excited because they've seen this massive growth jump. Like if you've never bench pressed before and you can only bench the bar and you're a man, by week 2 you're pushing 135 just because you've trained those muscles, you've kind of woken them up a little bit, and that's a massive increase. but you might be kind of stuck between 135, 155 for like a month after that. So there's a point of diminishing
Well,
returns that turns people off.
well, the thing to understand there, and again, this is something that is really not discussed in what I would consider like mainstream fitness or strength conversations, is that those initial gains are neurological adaptations.
Mm,
We get a lot of initial um, that initial gain, like you said. If you take an adult man who's never bench pressed before, that first day it's going to look really awkward. It's going to feel weird. It's going to
yeah.
feel kind of like a fish out of water. And then after a few weeks, especially if that's kind of what we would call like dedicated practice, very focused repetitions, paying close attention to what you're doing, there's going to be very quick neural adaptation. That happens much faster than muscular adaptation. The ability for our neurons to sort of learn new pathways and develop that skill, that happens much more quickly than creating and laying down new tissue. And so that sort of fast result is actually neural adaptation. And then once that kind of plateaus, then everything that happens after that is going to be a muscular adaptation. And again, that happens much more slowly, and it requires proper recovery, proper nutrition, proper
Mm,
programming, and all of that stuff. And so we need a certain amount of consistency. We need to understand that that's the process going as we go through it, so that we can kind of allow ourselves to be patient, to make sure that we get those raw materials and the recovery time, and that we do that process correctly. And so that's why it's so important, especially for somebody who's, getting into strength or fitness for, the first time, to, really seek out the best information possible. And I would always encourage somebody to work with, a real coach, a real professional, so that you can understand those things and get the guidance you need to get the results that you're looking for whatever your goals are.
yeah, that's definitely important. At minimum, do some good research.
Hmm.
The last thing
Definitely.
you want to do is lift heavy weight without doing any kind of research. You're going to hurt yourself. It's gonna be a bad time.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I'm the type of person that wants to understand the governing dynamics
Mm,
behind anything that I do. So, I don't care if I'm learning how to, shoot a rifle, or learning how to feed myself or train, or getting into business. Like I want to do all the research for all of it.
yeah.
I don't want to go into any situation unprepared. So, um, researching and asking questions and seeking mentors and guidance is kind of, that's fundamental to me.
Do you still have your gym, or is that a past venture?
That's a past venture. So I had the gym House of Strength from 2012 to 2016, and sold that, going from 15 to 16.
Oh, you sold it off. Okay, interesting.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, that was right around the time in the book you were talking about your TV consumption. You were saying, 2 hours each night, and then about 4 hours each day on the weekend, and it was about 14% of my life. And that's when we got rid of the TV right away.
Yeah,
And
that was 2012. That was when I started the business.
yeah,
So I hired a business coach, and he became a mentor. I was a part of that mastermind, and his name is Paul Reddick. And to this day, we're still in contact. We have a podcast that we do together now called Going
cool.
567. We're actually working on a book together, so it'll be my second book and our first book together.
Hmm.
But Paul was really the first person to introduce me to what I would call this overarching idea of personal development, right? And he made the statement to us that our lives are perfectly designed for the results that we are currently getting.
Yes.
And I think one of the questions I ask people a lot is, what's the best advice you've ever been given? And whenever people turn that around and ask me, that line is my answer. Your life is perfectly designed for the results that you are currently getting. And that's the quote that led to some of the math that you're referring to in the book, where we looked at this thing and we said, okay, let's say you watch two college football games on Saturday. let's say each game is 3 hours. So 3 hours, 3 hours, that's 6 hours. And then if you do that again on Sunday, that's another 6 hours. So that's 12 hours. And then we did the math on that, and you say, okay, so 12 hours a weekend times 4 of those in a month, that's 48 hours in a month that you're watching other people live their dreams instead of spending that time on making your dream a reality. And I think that's the crucial part, right? It's not to say that watching sports or watching TV is an evil in and of itself. Like, that could be a whole other conversation. That's not, I mean, I could argue that, but that's not what we're arguing here. What we're pointing out here is there are so many of us that say, I don't have time to do this. I don't have the time. But the truth is, the time is there. We're just spending it on other things. And later in the book, I outline how much time the average person spends on social media.
It's scary.
I have an alarm or a timer on my phone where it only it limits me to an hour a day of social media usage. And I can't change this. If somebody knows how, please let me know. But my phone lumps texting into social net. It calls it social networking. And so, but I actually kind of like it because at a certain, I hit that hour mark every single day, but I can always tell, do I hit it at noon? Or do I hit it at 7 or 8 p.m.?
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's texting. I've got some coaching clients and we've got some group text, and there's a lot of stuff that happens in text. So it's not necessarily all Instagram. And I say Instagram because I don't have Facebook on my phone. So that's not a time thing for me on my phone. But I believe, without looking, I believe it was something like 2 to 3 hours a day that the average person spent. And this study was, my book was published in 2018. The study was probably from 2015. And I promise you, and I don't think anybody would argue with this, that we spend more time now on average than we did 5 years ago looking at screens, right?
Yeah.
And so if you add up YouTube and podcasts and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and whatever the things are, Twitter, that's a lot of time. And the way we did the math in the book, it came out to be 5 years. And I just make the point in saying, what if I could come to you and say, Stephen, I can give you a 5-year sabbatical and you can do whatever you want with 5 years of your life.
Yeah.
Now, you're not going to get those 5 years in a block of continuous time. And so I think that's where we have this, we do this mental gymnastics with ourselves where we say, oh, it's only 15 minutes, only 30 minutes. Oh, it's, it's one game, or, oh, I'm just going to watch a movie tonight. But it all adds up, and that's the argument we made in the book. That's what you're kind of really referencing here, is that, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, just doing the math on 4 football games a weekend is 48 hours in a month. If you divide that by an 8-hour workday, that's 6 8-hour workdays in a month that you could apply to your side hustle and build whatever the thing is that you want. And so when I go to a business coach and I'm like, man, and in his mind, I'm complaining that my business isn't where I think or want it to be. He's like, well, dude, there's 6 8-hour workdays that you're just watching somebody else live their dream. And so that's why I say that advice is the best advice I've ever been given.
It is pretty awesome advice. And it's something that I think, it was one of those things that I think my wife and I have been kind of subconsciously being more aware of as of recent. She's a small business owner. And then with myself starting the podcast and wanting to make it into something bigger than a podcast, we've been putting our time into these things, but we definitely still aren't the best at managing our time. And that comes down to, being sucked into our phones. That's an addiction for a massive portion of our population. And, we're not exempt from that at all. So that's something that we need to work on. And, we do watch TV as well. We try and keep it to 1 episode of something per night. So, usually less than an hour, but it still adds up. And then one of our issues too is the timing. So, watching TV right before bed is going to affect our sleep and this kind of thing. So there's a few things that we need to, kind of change around, or at least think about and brainstorm of how we can be more efficient with those, and still get our our relaxing time, or our chill time, but also take advantage and be able to grow our businesses and that kind of thing too. And I think the biggest issue with a lot of people in society is we're just not conscious. A lot of people just go through their day and their life just kind of stumbling around, and this comes down to setting goals. When you said that statistic in your book, I started thinking about the people in my life, and I thought, oh, do I have people that set goals? And I was kind of going through each person that I know closely, and there was only one or two of them that I could say with certainty that that person sets goals, attainable goals, and actually tries to achieve them. And I think it's pretty uncommon for people to be even aware that they need to better themselves. And we just kind of go through life looking at our phones and watching TV and, complaining about our small paychecks.
You said the magic word. It's awareness, right? And so this is another thing that's in the book. Awareness creates choice. And, we talk about creating better defaults for ourselves. And this is something that behavioral scientists refer to as choice architecture. And so, exactly what you just said. So many of us, so many people go through life in what we would call a default mode. And there's no awareness, there's no intention. And if we can just bring an awareness to everything, right? Audit your actions, your behaviors, your thoughts, bring an awareness to, the narrative that runs through your head about who you are and what you are not, an awareness to how you spend your time, an awareness to, whether or not you set goals, and awareness to all of these things, right? And so in that moment of awareness, now we are afforded choice, and we have a choice to continue to go kind of on autopilot and to proceed without intention, or we have the choice to make those actions align with our goals. And when I first published the book, I would always sign the book. I would write "fuck your feelings" and then just sign my name, because a lot of people wanted me to write that. They just thought that was cool.
Yeah.
But now every book I sign, I write, "May your actions always align with your values." And I think I don't know that those words are in the book in that concise of language, but if there's one thing that I want people to take from reading the book, that would be it. That from this day forward, your actions align with your values. And my hope is that this book helps people to do that. And so, it's like we've been kind of saying all along, we all have goals. We all have things that we want for ourselves and from our life. And the thing that will determine whether or not those happen is going to be how we spend our time. And that is, the choices that we make, the actions we take, our decisions. And, the title of the book is what it is, because I want you to act according to your values as opposed to how you feel in any given moment.
Yeah, that's one that people struggle with a lot too. And was it in your book that it said 95% of our choices are made by emotions?
Yeah, so that's actually research from cognitive neuroscientist Antonio Damasio. And I won't get into too much of the boring science. It's in the book if people want to read it. But he had a patient that had a brain tumor. It was removed. Part of his brain was damaged from that surgery. And post-surgery, this gentleman had incredible difficulty making even the simplest decision. Couldn't decide where to go for lunch. Couldn't decide what clothes to wear. And that's how, as a scientist, Damasio was able to determine sort of this decision-making matrix that we go through for even the most simple choice. So, if we were in a room of 20 people and, I said, "Stephen, you're picking where are we going for lunch?" You're going to look around and you're going to take into account, okay, well, how much time do we have for lunch? Are we driving or are we walking? So, what kind of distance for this place? Who's here? Does anybody have any special dietary needs or concerns? All of these little things go into where are we going to eat lunch. And in those micro decisions, we have to assign value to certain things. And so, that's kind of the ground for how he arrived at this, but that number comes from his research, and it is 95% of our decisions are made based on how we feel in any given moment. And if you start to look at high performance and, why some people succeed and other people don't, and then you keep that in mind, it's very obvious that the people who are able to succeed or accomplish anything of significance in their life are people who are able to delay gratification, or are able to show up and do what they're supposed to do regardless of how they feel. And on the other hand, or the other end of that spectrum, the folks who struggle the most are the people who are least in control of their limbic system, which is that portion of our brain where emotions and feelings lie, or kind of come from. And then those are the same people who, allow that part of their brain to really kind of run the show. And again, like that's what the book is designed to do, is to teach you about this and to show you how to move from limbic system control to prefrontal cortex control, which is the portion of our brain where executive function lies, rational thought, and that's all in the book. I won't bore you with too much more of that science.
Yeah, there's a ton of it in there, and it really is incredible information. So I would highly suggest that anyone picks it up, even if you don't have the time to read it, get the Audible. If you don't have the time, again, talking about time, but if grab the Audible and
put it on 1.5 speed, and I'll read it to you.
Have you had, like, it's easy for people to say a lot of things. Have you found in your life that you've been successfully able to implement most of the things you talk about in the book? And have you been able to keep that consistent over the years, or do you still kind of struggle with that thing? Do you find it's, a little bit robotic at times? And there, obviously we all have those days where, you need to watch 2 or 3 episodes of TV and relax. Hey guys, I want to interrupt this episode just briefly to remind you yet again to subscribe to the podcast. Whatever platform you're on, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button as well. Check out our website, connect with me on social media, on Instagram, StephenLopes_MOB, and share the podcast with your friends. A lot of guys don't understand, don't know, don't realize that there are podcasts that are made specifically for them as individuals and as men. And that's exactly what we're doing here, guys. This podcast is meant just for men. Obviously, women can benefit as well, but the podcast is really geared towards men and creating better men, creating better community leaders, and just trying to be the best men that we can be every day, guys. So share it with your brother, your father, your coworkers, whoever it is in your life, guys, that needs to listen to a great podcast. Share it with the guys in your life and connect with me on social media and let me know all about it, guys. I hope you enjoy it. Let's hop back in.
This is a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that, or in those words. There's nothing in the book that I haven't used myself. There are certain, I refer to it almost as like tools in the toolbox, right? And if we use that analogy, there are certain jobs where you may not need certain tools, right? So there may be days or seasons or phases of my life where I rely more heavily on some of these tools. And there may also be times where there are certain tools that I just don't need. They're not necessary for certain phases or aspects. If you're going to build a house, like you don't have to use, you're probably going to use a hammer and a drill a lot more than you might use like I'm not a carpenter, but like whatever a specialized tool might be,
Sure.
right? And so I think to that part of your question, everything that's in there is something that I have used at some point. I can tend to be very robotic on a lot of things. Food is one of them. I can eat pretty much the same thing every single day. It's funny, I have a side project going right now with a good friend of mine. It's called Fuel to Pursuit. And we are working on, some nutrition stuff. And he's also a chef. And even though I have a degree in that, like I've been taught everything about like how to be a great cook, I cook like like I don't cook, and I make the joke and I say, if it takes me longer to prepare a meal than it does to eat it, I'm not dealing with it.
Not in.
Like I will literally crack open a can of tuna. I will put in a packet of like the 100-calorie packets of guacamole and just mix it up and eat it, and grab some nuts, and I'm good to go. And just, that's when I say I can be robotic with food. Like I can eat boring, I can eat cold meals that are pre-prepared. I don't have to reheat them. Because for me, it's just, and this is just what works for me. It's what do I need to get in so that I can just get on and do other things. That doesn't work for everybody. And so, that's one aspect where I can be robotic. There are other areas where, look, we're all human. We are all flawed. We are all works in progress. So there are certain things in the book that I continue to have to focus on in order to, to implement them at the level that I want to. And so this is something we talk about in our Better Human workshops as the quadrants of competency. So if you're not familiar with this, just imagine a giant square, and then you draw a line vertically and horizontally. So now we have 4 of the same types of squares within that one square. And in the bottom, let's see, it would be bottom right. I'm trying to do this so that you can see it, so I'm getting confused. But if you imagine this like you're looking at it, bottom right would be unconsciously incompetent. And that means you suck at something and you don't even know it. And so by definition, that's a blind spot. And, I'll cut to the chase and just say, that's where our largest opportunities for growth lie. And that's why we need friends and mentors and coaches and people who can call us on our shit and point things out and tell us like, hey, you're messing up here, or hey, you need to do this. Like you read a book and you have this aha moment. Like those things were blind spots you didn't know, right? And so that's why they're our largest opportunity for growth. From there, we move into the next quadrant, which is consciously incompetent, which means you're not good at it and you're not good at it. So if I were to list all of my weaknesses, by definition, that's where they go, because I know about them. I can't list them if I don't know about them.
Yeah.
Right. And so then the next quadrant is it's consciously competent, meaning I'm okay at it, I'm good at it, but I have to think about it. And then the final quadrant is unconsciously competent, meaning this is the thing that's in your wheelhouse. You could do this with your eyes closed. And so it's really important in kind of regards to your question. We always have to keep this in mind, that we're always somewhere on that spectrum or in that like spiral of those quadrants. Life is dynamic. It's not static. And there might be a phase or a season where, I slip and I move back to consciously competent or, consciously incompetent or those things that I haven't yet moved all the way to unconsciously competent. I have to think about them or I think about them and I still screw them up. And we have to be comfortable and accepting enough to not place judgment or shame or assign guilt to those things. And this gets into like neurological wiring and repetitions. And again, like a lot of this is in the book, but do you play sports?
Yeah. Yeah.
Give me a sport.
Not in the last 2 years, but yeah, I play a lot of hockey.
Okay. So let's think about like skating, right? I'm not a hockey player. So, either something like skating or even like the act of taking a shot itself, right? Like if I taught you a new way to take a shot, how many repetitions have you accumulated over your life up until this point with the way that you take a shot now?
Yeah, there'd be thousands.
Right. And so if we made a change to the way you take your shot, inherently you would have this acceptance of the fact that there's going to be what we would call learning curve, right? And most people would mistakenly think of that as muscle memory. It's not muscle memory. Muscles do not have the capacity for memory. It's neurological wiring, right? It's exactly what we talked about earlier with the guy who's never benched before, right? Mm-hmm. Those early gains are neurological gains. riding a bike is not muscle memory. That's neurological wiring. You've patterned that. Same thing with a golf swing or a tennis serve or a hockey slap shot. But if we make a change, you have to accumulate enough repetitions with the new way more than the old way for the new way to become the way.
Right.
Right. And so any mistake that we make, any bad repetition, as you learn that new one, we forgive ourselves for it because we know we're learning a new way and we know how many times we've done it the old way in the past. But when the same thing happens in like personal development, like if we change our diet or if we try to begin a new fitness regimen or, whatever our new habit is, we say we're going to meditate or we're going to journal. If we miss a day or if we can't meditate, we can't calm our mind even though we sat down to meditate, or we eat off track. We fail to have that acceptance, that forgiveness of ourselves as we learn the new way, as we kind of grease the groove with the new repetition, like the new form. And so that's where a lot of people get tripped up as they kind of go through those quadrants of competency and build new habits and change behaviors. So there's the whole like guilt, shame, judgment cycle that's involved in all this too.
Yeah. So it's easier to modify a skill you already have than it is to learn a new skill from scratch. And you talk about this in your book as well, when you talk about, having the courage to either start a business or do whatever it is. And if you look at a child learning a new skill, and whenever they fail, they just get back up and keep going and they try again, and they're not ashamed of it. And you talk about it as well when a kid has ambitions. If you talk to a young kid and he says he wants to be a pilot, he doesn't care who hears it. He wants everyone to hear that he wants to be a pilot, or he wants everyone to hear that he wants to be king of the world. But if an adult says, "Oh, I want to start a business," they whisper it, or they're afraid to even tell their spouse, and maybe they'll only tell strangers or something because they know they won't be judged by a stranger, or they don't really care. And isn't that so weird that we're like that? And this goes into surrounding
Ego.
yourself with people that want your success and that kind of thing. And so surround yourself with people that want you to success, and surround yourself with people that you want to be around.
Yeah, kids are amazing. We can learn so much from watching them. And, to me, the biggest difference in, the example that you highlighted, like kids saying their goals and adults, being afraid to speak that, it's to me, it's ego, right? We're afraid to put our ego on the line. We're afraid of how people will receive us, or, will they understand me? Will they like me? Will they support me? Will they think this of me? And that's all ego. And kids up to a certain point haven't developed the ego yet. And that's why it's so amazing to watch them. And to your point about like riding a bike, or even learning to walk, like there's no judgment. Like a kid doesn't say, man, I'm 6.5 months old, I should be walking by now. I'm 3 years old, why can't I ride a bike? Like, they don't think like that. There's no judgment. And this is one of the things that we're going to explore in our new book that I mentioned with Paul, is like toxic goals, and it's competing, comparing, and copying. And kids at that age, they haven't learned to compare themselves to somebody else and to compete with somebody else. All that kid knows is, and doesn't even know it, he just wants to learn how to walk, or she. Like they don't even have that. I don't know. Maybe a kid somewhere in the history of the world has said, I want to learn how to walk, but it happens before you even have the verbal skills to articulate
they just
that
do
you have that desire. And so they definitely haven't developed, my twin brother is already walking. Like there's not that competition and competing isn't there. So that level of toxicity around accomplishment doesn't exist. And there's a whole distortion cycle around that. But it's a really fascinating thing to watch kids and to see how, adults kind of distort and warp a lot of those things.
Yeah, and we limit ourselves so much, right? Like, I mean, how many people, and that's one thing that I'm really trying to get a grip of is how many adults do you see when they're 40 or 50 and they always talk about what they wish they would have done 20 years ago, and they wish they started this business, and they wish they would have written that book or hiked that trail or whatever it is. And that's one thing that I'm really trying to get a grip of right now, just hitting 30, is I don't want to be like that.
Mhm.
So if I have any of these ambitions, let's make it happen. Let's make it happen now.
Yeah, and there's a phrase, memento mori, and it's basically a reminder that we're all going to die someday. And it's kind of a morbid thought to think about, but it's one of the things that is never far from my mind and drives me on a daily
Hmm.
basis. And we only get one life. You don't get to hit the reset button on this thing. You don't, as far as we know. You
Yeah.
don't get a second chance at it. And because of that, we need to make sure that we don't waste our time. I mean, I know, kind of echoing your sentiments, I don't want to be 80 years old sitting on a rocking chair saying like, man, I'm glad I saw every episode of The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure that's not going to be my crowning achievement,
Yeah.
or the thing that I'm most proud of. And so, scrolling on social media, or zoning out, and using. And again, like as we said earlier, it's not necessarily about talking about these things as an inherently bad thing.
Hmm.
Nothing has meaning, good or bad, only the meaning that we assign to it. Um, but what we have to realize is that we're trading our time for a lot of these activities. And if we're using things as an anesthetic, meaning like a numbing agent, I eat, or I drink, or I do drugs, or I gamble, or I have a porn addiction, or, I mindlessly watch TV in order to not have to face the things that I'm dealing with, or confront the things that are in my head. Those are the things that I really want people to bring, as we said earlier, an awareness to, and then, ask themselves, is this really how I want to spend my time? There's a Native American question like about that rocking chair, right? Like if you imagine yourself in a rocking chair when you're 80 years old, looking back on your life, what are you most proud of? What did you do? What did you accomplish? What will your legacy be? And I think if we can remove ourselves from the moment, and kind of have that 50,000-foot view, that witness or objective perspective of ourselves, it changes our perspective, and hopefully that can help us, if we need to, make different or better decisions about how we're moving through the world.
Yeah, I agree. I love what you said too about using your time for these great things. And it, like, social media is not, it's not bad, but there are bad things about it sometimes with how we use it. And one thing you said in the book was make sure that you use social media and social media doesn't use you. And that was I mean, I guess I think about it all the time, but it was kind of like a punch in the face to me, because I can mindlessly scroll on Instagram, or
Hmm.
you keep checking it and you keep saying it keeps telling you like, oh, you're all caught up. And it's like, yeah, but what if I keep scrolling though? It's like it's even telling you
Yeah.
like, you've already been here, go do something else. But
it's bad when social media says go do something
I
else,
know it's bad, right? And like, and
because they make all their money if your eyeballs are there. So
yeah,
I
I
mean, if
know.
they're telling you go somewhere else,
Yeah, you're
that's
doing
bad
something
news.
wrong. But like I'm like you, where I don't have Facebook on my phone. I don't like Facebook. I don't really use it at all. And I recently got Twitter on there, but I don't really use it, and I'm kind of disliking. I don't know if it's just because what's going on right now, but like I just find Twitter so negative, and it's a real big drag, and it's just
I
a
have,
man,
yeah,
it's just a big
I have
fight
Twitter
all the
on my
time.
phone. Yeah, I've got Twitter on my phone, but I can't tell you the last time I even opened it.
Yeah,
I've never been a big Twitter person.
yeah, me either.
Just, you know,
I just thought, like, starting the podcast, it might be good idea to put stuff on there. but I really dislike Twitter. It's like, it's just so negative, and everyone's just arguing and fighting and calling each
Mhm.
other out and trying to get each other banned. And, it's this big right versus left thing. Like that, Twitter's basically just right versus left. And it's just like this big argument, at least with what I've seen. I'm sure there's some good stuff on there, but I can't seem to find it. Maybe that's just me where I'm looking, but I find there's better platforms. Like I seem to enjoy Instagram, and I find that's a good place to reach people and stuff like that. And talking about comfort zones, that's one thing from starting the podcast that I've been trying to stretch is my comfort zones. And
Mhm.
every single new thing I do for the podcast or for Men of Bronze is new to me, and it's uncomfortable. So first it was recording the podcast. The first time I recorded an episode, I made sure my wife was out of the house because like it was uncomfortable. So now it's no problem, and I'll record myself talking, doing a voiceover or something with her on the couch. It's no big deal. So I've gotten over that hurdle.
Yeah.
And then, the newest thing is like, can I do IGTV stuff? So, trying to record myself talking about a certain topic and putting it on IGTV, a short 2-minute clip or something. And the first time I did that, I've only done it once. The first time it took me like 3 or 4 tries because I was getting all up in my head about it. And, what are people going to think? And then eventually I was like, who cares? Just freaking put the video up. Like who cares? If you want to share the content, share the content. If you don't want to share it, don't share it. So we really
You
need
know,
to put our ego aside and just, if you want to do something, make it happen. It really is as simple as just do it. Start it. If you want to start something, start it.
yeah. And I mean, I'm sure there's something to be said for accumulating the reps as well. And I'm sure
Hmm.
if if you continue the podcast for 2 or 3 years, in year 3, you might go back and listen to a podcast from year 1, and you'll say like, man, I was terrible.
Yeah.
I can't believe I published those. But that just speaks to how far you will have grown, and then what your standard will be after those 3 years compared to what it is now. And the same can be said for any of our other pursuits. And so that's one of the great things about continuing to grow and continuing to push.
Yeah. That's a good thing to tie into your moving the chains analogy. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So this is another one that Paul shared with our mastermind group, and the idea is it's centered around, in American football, you get 4 plays to gain 10 yards, and most teams will punt on 4th down. So if we divide 10 yards by 3 plays, then it's 3.4 yards per play.
Mhm.
And the concept then becomes, if you knew all you had to do was gain 3.4 yards every single play, your mindset shifts to, okay, well, let's just turn around, we'll hand the ball off, we'll run it up the middle, we'll gain a couple of yards, we'll turn around, we'll do it again. And so many people in life and in business and in every aspect of life are kind of brainwashed into thinking that we have to pursue the highlight reel play, the thing that's going to get us on Sports Center's top 10 plays, whether
Yeah.
it's a Hail Mary or a one-arm catch or one-handed catch or whatever. And that's really not like that's not a successful way to build a business, or to that's not the approach that's going to lead to a successful life. And really, the move the chains analogy is, it's just a reminder to identify the 1 or 2 key things that you can do every single day that would equate to the proverbial 3.4 yards.
Hmm.
And I think more than anything in my life, adopting that mindset has been responsible for any measure of success that I could say I've had since 2012. And I've had so many people that I've worked with and have come through our workshops. At the end of 6 months or at the end of a year of doing this, they look back and they're like, man, I cannot believe how much I've achieved or how much I've gotten done, because I stopped looking at like the totality of the thing. I stopped thinking, oh my God, I've got to gain 100 yards, so I'm just going to start throwing Hail Marys. And like a Hail Mary is like the lowest percentage completion of any play that there is. Like, why
Yeah.
would you build a business model? Why would you build a life model around the thing that has the lowest chance of actually happening? Whereas, if you take the high percentage play and you turn around and you do it all the time, and there's another quote that I love remarkable people do unremarkable things
Mm.
with remarkable consistency. And that's it, man. If you just, eat the salad, do the workout, go to bed early, do this thing, do that thing, make the phone call, do this. It's boring. It's not sexy. It doesn't sell books. It does, but it's like, that's the stuff that gets you wherever it is that you want to be. That's the stuff that makes you a successful entrepreneur, a successful real estate person, a business owner, a husband, whatever it might be. And so Move the Chains is just that reminder to, show up and do one or two things every single day that move your mission forward.
Yeah, it's an awesome analogy, and I love it, especially for someone like myself. Again, I keep trying to refer these things back to myself and kind of reflect on them, and that's how it's easier to understand that way. And that's how it is kind of when I think about starting Men of Bronze and the podcast is, starting something off is very challenging, and we always think like, oh well, what if I land that guest that has 1 million followers and he'll share my podcast and then I'll blow up. And that's not how it works, though. There's a very, very small percentage of people's followers that are even going to listen to your podcast. Never mind go and actually follow you. So what you need to do is produce good content and stay
Over
consistent.
and over and over.
Yeah.
Yep.
Release 300 episodes. Don't expect to be getting, 100,000 downloads on episode 5. The word hasn't been spread yet. It takes time. You got to build this. You got to connect with people, and that's kind of the fun of it. For me, that's what I've been enjoying the most is just connecting with people. And a few guests that I've had on the show, I would consider them friends already. They're great guys.
Mm-hmm.
They were happy to connect. I was happy to connect with them. And just watching their content, even talking to them, it's like I can almost consider them a bit of a mentor, which is awesome. And like the growth I've had just from starting this is incredible. So the biggest thing is start something, and after that it's keep doing it. Consistency, like you said, the small things every day, improve, get better. Even with the website building, I'm constantly trying to how can I make the blog a little bit better looking, or how can I do a little bit better graphic work on my Instagram posts, or whatever it is. And these things are important. So it's you got to put that work in. And like you said, the monotonous things, that's how you get there. It's not the Hail Mary plays. It's the small things every single day. Build that business, build those connections, build your skill set, build your content, and eventually the people will come.
Yeah. I mean, you nailed it. It's just show up, it's be consistent and be patient. It's going to take longer to build the thing than any of us want or expect.
Oh, for sure.
It's, I think to your point about podcasting, I mean, it was, for me, it was never about, and remains, not being about what I can get from podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that the best things that I've gained from being a podcast host are the relationships and the things that come from those relationships with all of the guests that we've had, the people that I've been able to interview over 5 years of doing this. And, the windfall, if you want to call it that, from those relationships far outweighs any windfall, that may come from the number of downloads.
Yeah.
And I think to kind of piggyback on your point, I mean, I think that's it is, if you're real, if you're genuine, if you're seeking those connections with, the people that inspire you and inspire your audience, there's so much reward to be gained and shared from doing that.
I mean, that's almost how every successful thing happens. It's through passion, not through wanting money. I mean, obviously there's lots of people that have started business only to make money and it's worked. But if you look at anyone who has you talk about like Bruce Springsteen and that kind of thing, he didn't, or Picasso, you talk about Picasso as well. He has 100 pieces of art that are considered, incredible, but he's made 50,000. It's like,
yeah.
So it doesn't even make sense. So he's not painting to make money. He's painting because he likes painting.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to do.
And you could probably even take that a step further, and it's not even that he loves it. It's that somewhere inside of him, he has to.
It has to happen.
There's something in him that has to come out, and that's how it comes out of him. The same way for Springsteen, that it comes out of him as a written song. These people have something in them. You have something in you. I have something in me.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody listening has something, and it's just it's find that muse, cultivate and develop your ability to communicate and articulate that. Like, that is the accumulation of reps. That's Springsteen scratching out words and rewriting songs. That's Picasso painting. I forget the numbers on that, but 50,000 pieces over a lifetime. It worked crazy. Out to be, it was something like 10 or some absurd number of paintings every single day.
Yeah. And for 50 years or something like that.
Yes.
It was crazy.
Yeah. So it's just, and that goes back to what we said earlier. It's accumulation of reps. It's that deep work. It's working towards mastery. And, like you said, maybe 100 out of those 50,000 are, considered masterpieces. And so be ready for, and that's, again, like, that supports the idea of not playing for Hail Marys, right? Like, if a guy says, hey, I'm going to create 100 masterpieces, I'm going to complete 100 Hail Marys. Yeah. He had to throw 50,000 passes to do it. Nobody's going to get that. Nobody's going to draft that quarterback for their fantasy football team.
Yeah. You said, I think it was like 0.02% of his paintings were considered works of art.
Right.
Or masterpieces. Sorry. They're all works of art, but masterpieces. Yeah. It's, it reminds me of, I don't know if you read Jordan Peterson's book, 12 Rules for Life, or not, but
I haven't. I'm familiar with his work, but I haven't read the book.
Yeah. So he's made statements too, but when he wrote that book, he's rewritten every sentence multiple times in that book. So, he would write a paragraph or whatever, and he would go back and he would rewrite every sentence individually in different forms to find the best way to form that sentence. And he did that for the entire book. And like, that's putting the work in. He's not just throwing words down. He's giving you the best sentence he can possibly give. Every sentence has the most meaning possible. And that's how you make a masterpiece. And look what happened to his book. It's huge.
That is a level of commitment that the average person is not willing to put into their pursuits. And I promise anybody listening, if you put that level of commitment into anything that you do, you'll be amazed at what you get back.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. We just broke over an hour. So one question I have for you before we totally wrap up is, how can we be more effective men? And you can answer that any way you want.
I'm going to say listen more. And since you said more effective men, that's why I'm going to go with listen. So, I think as men, we have this tendency to, like, our default is to be fixers, right? We want to get in, we want to jump in, we want to fix things. We want to, like, be involved in being part of the solution. And especially in our relationships, with women, a lot of times our wives simply need to be heard. And we have this thing that we do. I do this with my wife. When she starts talking, I say, do you need my ears, my mouth, or my hands? And it's a reminder for both of us, right? Me more than her, but it gives her the ability to tell me, shut up and listen. That's all I need.
Yep.
Or shut up, listen. And then when I'm finished talking, you can speak and give me your feedback or your advice or whatever. And even, like, the most rare of any of them is, like, I need your hands. I need you to do something.
Yeah.
And so I think, just as a human, whether it's relationships or not, just listen more. And in your relationships with your significant others, maybe steal that trick and just ask, do you need ears, mouth, or hands?
I love that, man. I'm going to try that with my wife for sure. And that's something that I've had an issue with in the past too, is, like trying to fix, she'll come to you with a problem and you're like, oh, here's a solution, stop being ridiculous about it and do this. And it's like, that's like the last thing she wants to hear. Right. And it's like,
Yep.
You don't want to be around when you say something stupid like that, like,
dude, I wrote a book called Fuck Your Feelings. Like that's like, if there's anybody that like might piss off their wife, like it's me. But no, I'm really lucky to have an amazing partner, and she makes me better every day. So
yeah, that's good. Me too. So anyway, man, I appreciate your time. The book was incredible. I think I'm going to listen to it again.
Awesome.
Because I was trying to get through it over the last 3 days so I could get the whole thing before we talked. Yeah. But I want to go back and listen to it and just be a little more conscious. I took like 3 pages of notes, which is like I said, more notes than I've ever taken on a book before. So I think I'm going to re-listen to it and, start taking cold showers and unplugging my Wi-Fi at night.
Dude, I love it. Thank you for having me on, Stephen, and more importantly, thank you for doing what you're doing with Men of Bronze. Thank you for having the courage to do that, and just selfishly, thank you for reading and finishing the book before we talked. I mean, I think we made the comment earlier about going for things and becoming a great podcaster, and if you're going to interview somebody and you don't read their book, like I've been interviewed by people who haven't read the book and they want to talk about the book, and I'm like you're telling me your time is more important than mine.
Yeah, well, that's yeah, for sure.
When you said you were going to try to finish it, and that means a lot to me. So thank you for that.
That's great. That's one thing I try to do for sure is, I want to be able to engage with you, and, our time is very valuable. And if you're going to give me, an hour and a half of your time, which is actually more than an hour and a half because, you have to put other things in your life aside. So you're giving me 3, 4, or 5 hours just to be here. Whatever you're not doing is time that you're losing as well. So I appreciate that as well. So yeah, it's my pleasure. And the book was a joy. It was an honor to go through. So before I let you go though, any plugs? Where can people find you? What websites? What programs are you pushing? Anything you have, give it to us.
Thank you. RyanMunsey.com is my website. That's kind of the hub for everything. So if there's only one place to go, I'd say go there. Like we already said, if I'm on social media, it's Instagram, and that would be at Ryan Munsey with an _. The side projects, Fuel the Pursuit, and the upcoming book with Paul, anything that comes from those, I'll be talking about that on social or updating on the website. Books available on current book, Fuck Your Feelings, is available on Audible and Amazon, and you can get signed copies on my website.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate the book as well and everything you're doing. Definitely some life-changing things in that book for me that I'm going to be actually trying to implement, not just saying that. I'm actually going to try and put them in my life because I think there's real benefit there. So I thank you so much for that, man.
My pleasure. I love hearing that. Move the chains.
Yes, exactly. All right, man. Thank you for your time, and have yourself a good evening.
All right. Thank you, Stephen.
Bye, man.
All right. See you.
Thank you for listening. Remember to visit our website at www.menofbronze.ca. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and share the show with your friends and family. This was the Men of Bronze podcast. Be worth remembering.